All right, so let's go ahead and get started. So I am Laura Niederhoff, and I'm the director here at Shaw Public Library in Greenville. I just wanted to thank you all for joining us today for this event with Nicole Casper. So Nicole, just a quick introduction about Nicole. She graduated from Stonehill College in Massachusetts in 1995 and began working in archives and records management. In 1997, she got her master's degree in library and information science from Simmons College in Boston. She has been a certified records manager since 2001 and a certified archivist since 2020. So she is currently let me see if I can get this right here, the director of archives. Is that your current position?
Yep.
Okay, and she is the director of archives at Stonehill College, and she cares for all of the historical and special collections that they have there. She lectures and does exhibits at Stonehill on local history. She co-teaches Stonehill's public history class and mentors students interested in pursuing a career in museums and archives. In addition to her work at Stonehill, she is the author of 2 books with the late James Benson. The first book that she wrote was The Strand Theater Fire, the 1941 Brockton Tragedy, and The Fall 13. And then the book that she will be talking about today, which is The Brockton Tragedy at Moosehead Lake. And in her free time, she is an avid crafter and quilter. So welcome, Nicole. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me tonight. I'm going to share my screen, so hopefully this will work. And I just have a few slides. So let's see if this will allow me to. All right, can y'all see that?
I can see it, yep.
So, so thank you for having me. This was our second book that Jim and I wrote. Jim Benson really, I have to say, was the spearhead for this book. This is a picture of us about a month before Jim passed away. Jim died 2 weeks before the book was officially published. He died of a massive heart attack. Jim had actually authored several books, and that's actually how I met him. He had done several books in the Arcadia Images of America series, including West Bridgewater, Brockton, one on 3 on Brockton, one on postcards of Old Canada Road, and a couple of other ones. That was how I met him. So as the archivist at Stonehill, one of our collections is a large photograph collection of a local photographer named Stanley Bowman, which has 500,000 negatives in it. And that collection ranges from the late 1930s through about 2000. And when literally within like a month of Stanley passing, Jim emailed me and was like, I need to get access before my newest book. And I was like, yeah, no. But I did work with him and worked with him on all 3 of his Brockton books and his West Bridgewater book to get him photos. Those books were very popular, and Arcadia, which owns the History Press, which published the Moosehead book, they have what's called a disaster series. And they contacted Jim and asked if he had a book or something that he would like to write. Unlike the Images of America, this is more of a storybook with a limited amount of photos. And that's when we rewrote the Strand Theater Fire book. The Strand Theater Fire book, Stanley Bowman was actually at the fire. So I had, as part of the collection, most of the official photos from the fire. When that book was successfully published in 2017, Jim came to me and he goes, it's time, we need to write about Moosehead. Now, I'm going to admit, I have never been to Moosehead Lake. My ventures to Maine are pretty much limited to Freeport, the LL Bean store. That's pretty much it.
I will interject and say you should definitely come if you have a chance, because it is one of the most impressive bodies of water in New England.
Well,
and even
that was
probably the Northeast, or, you know, the whole Northeast, I would say. So,
and that was our plan. So Jim actually had, and his family still has, a cabin at the Forks on, I believe it's Moxie Lake. So he was very familiar with the area, and we had planned for, after the book was published, for me to come up and see, you know, and do all this stuff. But I always feel like when I talk about the book, I'm like, I've never been there because I never got a chance to go up. So, but this was, so Jim was like, we need to write about Moosehead. And I'm like, okay. Jim was an amazing local historian. And this was the story. I'm not sure why it had such, you know, reverence with him that he needed to tell the story, whether it was because he had that connection with Maine. He loved Maine. He was going to retire up at his cabin there. He went there 3 or 4 times a year. So we contacted History Press and we said, we've got this story about, you know, this drowning at Moosehead Lake, this tragedy. We want to tell this story. And they're like, go ahead, go for it. And he's like, great. It's 2017. We need it published by the beginning of May in order for the 80th anniversary or the 90th anniversary. And I could see the publisher going, really? But Jim was insistent. So we wrote the book. And so this is Jim and I in March. He was the administrator at the local Lutheran church, and we had done an event for their Lenten breakfast, and this was him holding basically the galleys of the book. And so that was kind of how the book came to be. Our sources, it was funny. I've heard from so many people who have spent time at Moosehead Lake, you know, local people like my, you know, who, you know, my parents say, oh, I was telling them about your book because they go up to Moosehead all the time and they never heard of this tragedy. And I'm like, yep, you know, and it really truly is a Brockton tragedy because it really affected the, you know, the city of Brockton. The way we got most of our research was we got it through the morgue books that the local historical society has of the Brockton enterprise. So we had, Jim and I at the time were president and vice president of the Brockton Historical Society. So of course we had access to these. These are the large bound volumes of the Brockton enterprise that the society has from the early 1900s to the 1960s. So we were able to use these as, you know, pretty much how, along with access to the Boston Globe and some other research of what goes on. Of course, knowing that historical, like newspapers are not always accurate. So trying to get some of those other sources as well. We also wanted to involve the families. That was one thing we had done with the Strand Theater Fire. So we put out on our social media looking to see what, if we could contact or find any relatives of any of the, you know, of those who died or survivor. And we did actually find the granddaughter of Captain Lace. And I'll talk about her in a little bit. We actually had family members, several family members give us photos and things like that, which was really great to do that as we look through it. These are those who are involved. The names for Brockton, if you're a historian type person in Brockton or you know Brockton history, some of the names are very familiar in Brockton history because one of the, those who died, Fred Dahlberg, his family owned the local mortuary, which is still in business. So the Dahlberg Funeral Home, people know that name. Chief Daley is known. Brockton has a very popular fire museum, so that's something people knew. The others people really didn't know too much about. So as we tried, and so our goal in the book, and we mirrored it after what we had done in the Strand, was to tell the story and then tell kind of short bios of each of the those involved. And I was the one who did, and Jim and I split it up. I was the second half of the book. He was the first half of the book. That's how we kind of split. And then we went through each other's work. I was also the one in charge of all of the photos, because that was beyond Jim. So any scanning and digitization was also my responsibility. As one might encounter, something from 1928 does not have a lot of quality photos, and the hardest picture we had was Dr. Moberg. We actually ended up using his confirmation picture from the Lutheran Church, because we just didn't have a good enough picture of him as an adult. I showed this because everybody's heard of this was like the most amazing part of the story for me, was that the fact that it had a connection to Charles Ponzi and the Ponzi scheme, in that Sheriff Blake, when he was arrested, Ponzi was actually at the Plymouth County Jail. And so this is a picture of Sheriff Blake and Charles Ponzi. And so this was my foray into working with Getty Images and having to pay for a Getty image to be part of the book. So it, we think it's like a local thing, but it had other like tentacles that went out. So that was it also had the story had a connection to Sacco and Vanzetti, if you've read the book. Captain Lees had been involved. So for those of you not familiar, the Sacco and Vanzetti case, bank robbery, they were captured in Brockton, coming into Brockton from West Bridgewater. And Captain Lees was involved. He was on duty that day. He was not the one who arrested them, but he was at the desk when it occurred. This was probably the best thing that we found in our research, and this was part from the local paper. And I don't know, all you locals probably can tell me if it's much more accurate than what it is, as I said, but kind of where they left from, where they were going, where they sank, where Captain Lees got out and was at the camp. And kind of just to give you a perspective of, and also I know when I've shown this picture to people, they're like, wow, that really is a very big lake. People, at least for me, like I'm from Rhode Island. So for me, a lake that big, that's kind of, I can go from one end of Rhode Island to the other in 40 minutes. So, having to, explain that to people, how big it was and where they were going. And then this is Captain Lees and Chief Daley. And they were pretty much two of the, for Brockton was a big city. I mean, it had 60,000 people. It had 90 shoe factories. It really was a center hub of activity. That was where you went outside of Boston. You went to Brockton. That was where you went to shop. It had theaters, it had, major department stores. And it was where, like through the 1950s, Brockton was a really big hub. It was known as the male shoe capital of the world. They made millions of shoes, were shipped out of Brockton. Chief Daley was the third permanent fire chief of the city. And this is him with Captain Lees. This is a photo that we had in our Brockton Fire Museum. Very good friends. and that was, I think, when we were doing the book and we were talking to people, about, when people would say, as they always do when I do historical projects, well, why is it important? Like, why do you want to tell this story? And I'm like, because these were major characters. This tragedy really did shape the city of Brockton. And I know I've read like a few reviews of the book, and people are like, oh, it doesn't really focus on Moosehead Lake. And it doesn't, because our focus was the Brocktonians. And I know that was disappointing for some people. But the story that we wanted to tell was how these two were connected, but how Brockton, the tragedy at Brockton. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. I
actually had a question. Sorry, I didn't mean to
no, go ahead.
Interrupt, but how did they all, and maybe you're going to get to this, how did they all know each other? Were they sort of, part of some sort of group or club or?
So even as big as Brockton was, it's the same way it is today, that everybody seems to know each other from different things. They were all prominent in different ways, but mostly they were connected through city government. Okay. In the most part. They were part of different, so obviously Chief Lays and Chief Daly, the former mayor, Dahlberg was the city highway commissioner. So those were all city positions. The two physicians were one was the school physician. One was a local business, two were local businessmen. So kind of, they would interconnect. A couple of them were from the Swedish church. So it was just, and it was actually, there were more scheduled to go. It was actually supposed to be a bigger party. There was supposed to be more going up but that year, the ice, I guess, was a little bit stubborn coming off the lake. And so they'd actually originally thought that they would leave May 1st. And
it's very optimistic.
The
lake would be fully iced out May
1st. So when I was reading, I was going back over some of my notes in the book today, and Chief Daly actually didn't want to go because he was going to miss the policeman's ball. And so, but yeah, I think that it was just local government. Brockton had a lot of clubs. There was the Vega Club, there was the commercial club that most of them were part of. So there was a lot of different ways for them to interconnect, type of thing. So hopefully that answered the question. Mm-hmm. If not, I can see what.
No, that definitely makes sense.
So Jim's biggest thing, and I'll kind of go this, I mentioned Miss Captain Lays, this is his granddaughter, and this is Jim's dad. Jim didn't want just the book. Jim wanted to really make sure that this tragedy was remembered. So in addition to the book, there is now a memorial to the tragedy at the Brockton Historical Society, which was dedicated in May of 2018. And so we dedicated this to those who passed away. And so those, as you know, Mayor Howard, Fred Dahlberg, Plymouth County Sheriff, Moorburg was the dentist. He was probably the kind of outlander when we talk about how they all were interconnected. Bridgewood had been, and Peterson had been local government for physicians. But, the hardest one for us to talk about and find stuff was Sam Budden, the main guide. Everything that we talked to him, and we, when we were doing our research on him, he was barely mentioned. He was just the main person. Or, if it was mentioned, his brother was part of the search and his brother was looking for him. And I will say, his great-granddaughter contacted me a couple weeks ago and had read the book and was very excited had learned more about this. I guess after his death, the family had a really hard time and they didn't have like the true story. So I guess the book for them was able to clear up a lot of questions that the family had, which for me is very gratifying type of thing. And, you know, as I said, and I continue to say, this was Jim's baby. I would never have written this book. There are about 3 other people keep asking me what my next book will be. And I keep saying, well, Jim passed away and he was like my motivation to move on to stuff. So, but it wouldn't have been my top choice, but I think it was a story to be told. There are so many stories to be told that that was one of the reasons we did. The other thing that as an archivist and a historian, that came out of the book, in addition to Sam Budden, she actually sent me some additional photos of him, which I am very excited to have, and we're going to add to our collection that we have at the Brockton Historical Society. Chief Daly's family came to the book launch in that day and actually donated his badge to the Brockton Fire Museum. So, which had been in the family for years, and the pictures. So that for us, we were able to make more connections to those things. And those are my slides. Back to like the Maine connection, you know, for me, it was fascinating. I was reading the newspaper articles and there's one quote that kind of sticks out with me. And again, having not been there, but can imagine how cold it is up in Maine and the whole ice out. And Laura, I agree with you. May 1st was probably a very optimistic of ice being out of the lake type of thing. I don't know when it's normally out. But there was a comment in one of the newspapers that it would be, the lake wouldn't give up its dead easily. And the last body wasn't found until June. So it was 40 days before all of the bodies were recovered. And that was, you know, something, especially like in today's media, of how people like expect like everything to be finished right away. So, and given that it was such a long thing and that so many people, including Colonel Wilkinson of the Maine Warden Service, when he wrote the foreword, he's like, I had never heard of this before. And so it's interesting that it was such a large tragedy and it did take up a long time for the recovery, but it really had kind of been lost to history, except at the Brockton level where people like Jim had kept it alive. For Brockton, the tragedy did actually change parts of the city. So I mentioned our Strand Theater book, which was published the year before. Interestingly enough, at the end of the book, I talk about kind of how the fire department changed, because when Chief Daly passed, Assistant Chief Dickinson was then promoted, and then there were promotions like all the way down the line. When the Strand Theater fire happened in 1941, those who were promoted after Chief Daly's death were those who were in charge at the fire. Mm-hmm. And so that actually, you know, would Chief Daly had still been in charge at that time, what, you know, would have things had changed? I don't know, but it was just weird when we got to the end of the book and we were like, oh yeah, that had some of the effects, the cascading effects of it. So, so that's kind of my little spiel. But I'm happy to answer questions. And
yep, I did see a question in the chat. What caused the boat to sink? And actually, it might also be helpful for those that may not have read the book and that we're hoping to hear, you know, kind of a brief summary of the story of what happened. I think that would be really interesting and helpful for us too. Because you're right, it is, the story itself isn't so well known around here.
Nope, that's fine. I always hesitate. Like, I'm like, I don't want to repeat the whole story if people have read the book and like, you know. So basically what happened was 10 Brockton men had an annual fishing trip up to Moosehead Lake, and they were waiting for the ice out to notice to come. And it came the day before Mother's Day. So Mother's Day morning, they got up, got in the cars, drove up to Moosehead Lake, met Sam Budden, and boarded the boat, the Mac 2, to go up to the spinning camps. Supposedly, from different accounts, the lake was extremely rough. There were newspaper accounts that people had seen the boat from the shore. Very experienced pilots said that they would never have been out on it. About, as I showed in that map, about halfway up, the boat sank. The frustrating part is there's no clear conclusion of why it sank. So Captain Lays is the only survivor. He was the oldest of the group. And his account is sketchy at best, because when the account was taken, so according to him, they found that the pump in the boat was swamped. And so they began to take on water. They called Sam back. He got the pump moving. They bailed it out. They kept going. It got swamped again, and began to take on water. He then bailed as it got up to his knees, as did the others. He was the only one who made it to shore. And he made it to, and I can't remember whose camp he made it to. I think it was Mackenzie, and was able to get to shore, find a cabin, start a fire, and basically dry out enough and survive the night. And then the next morning found help. And then it started the recovery. There were several investigations, and none clearly determined what it was.
The captain was from Brockton also, and the
the captain was Sam Budden, and he was from Greenville.
Okay.
And so he was the Greenville, the person from Greenville who passed away. Okay. So they had met him up there. They had, he was in charge of taking them up. The boat had been put back into the water like earlier like March. I don't think obviously the ice wasn't out, so it hadn't actually sailed. One account from Captain Lays was they hit something. And so, but when they brought the boat back up, there was no damage to the boat. So the common theory was that the pump had failed and the boat had sunk. Another theory was the boat, because it had been in dry dock, the seams had opened up and allowed water to come in. I'm not much of a sailor, so I don't know how true that is. The boat was repaired and put back into service. And operated for several more years. But so Captain Lay survived. He ended up, he stayed up there, and then each of the, as the bodies, like, so within the first, like, I think it was a couple of days, the first body was, and then they recovered most. And then the last 3 were recovered in June. So it was, the last body was Dr. Moorberg's, which was like late June came up. Very graphic, you know, one of them still had his hat, was still securely on his head when he came up, when he was found. But that was, and what we did when we talk about each of the men, with the exception of Captain Lays, which we have last in the biographies as we talk about the book, we put them in order of their recovery. So they're not like an alphabetical order that we put them as how, when they were recovered, that we just felt that was the easiest way to do it. So there was no, I mean, there was an official investigation, there was another investigation, but it was basically the pump failed and the boat sank. Whether it should have been out that day, I guess it was extremely rough going. And so, but that's kind of a quick summary of the way, and, you know, of the book, of what happened. Interestingly, some of the interesting facts, several divers from Brockton volunteered to go up. Navy divers volunteered to go up. There was couple other there was one diver from Maine that did do searches. And then, of course, as with everything, the mayor of Brockton, when it happened, was like, well, spare no expense. We want to recover everyone. And then the city council of Brockton was like, what are they like? What are they charging us for? We don't want to pay this bill. And so, there was, and it was actually the rest of the bill ended up being paid by the families at the end. And I have to say, it was very grateful for my reference librarian at Stonehill, who was able to track down the original Supreme Court document that showed the end of the battle of the payment. So, which was a year later. So they spent a year fighting over a $3,000 bill. That's about what the state of Maine charged. I think it was like just over $4,000 total for the recovery effort, for that month-long recovery effort.
I have a couple of questions or comments.
Okay.
First of all, you need to go to Moosehead Lake because it's an amazing place, and to have written a book about it and not have been there is sort of amazing, but you need to go.
And embarrassing, I will admit, it's very embarrassing.
We will take you for a boat ride from Greenville up to Tomhegan. It's a long day, I'm just saying. My second thought is we're going up to open our camp, and we don't call cabins camps up at Moosehead Lake. So I'm sure your friend had a camp, not a cabin. Yeah. And last year we were up this weekend and the water temperature was like 42. So I'm sure it was pretty darn cold when those men fell into the water. I also have an idea for another book for you if you make it up to Moosehead Lake. My husband and I spent 3.5 months up there last summer in the middle of COVID and walked everywhere. And we went to the cemetery and we found 16 graves that really weren't marked. And they all were the same date, which was a date in November 1920. And my husband went home and did some research and found the Piscataquis news story. And it was a bunch of immigrants from there were a couple of names, and they were probably Polish or Eastern European. I'll put him on too. And they were headed from Greenville up to Chesuncook, which is twice as far as Tomhegan, is up to the top of Moosehead Lake, to go to a logging camp for.
They were on Chesuncook Lake, which is another big lake northeast of Moosehead. And they were immigrants who were going to work in the woods, and they, similar thing, they were traveling across the lake, and I guess their boat caught fire, and they jumped in the water, and it was November, and most of them, either couldn't swim or drowned or, some survived, but so it was a huge tragedy. It'd be a much harder research thing because these people were, I don't even know whether they figured out all of their names because they were Eastern European immigrants who had gone up there basically to get a job working in the woods. So
I'll have to look into that.
Interesting story that not many people know about, I'm sure.
Yeah, that's the amazing part. When you start digging into history, or you look into something, you're like, how did I not know this? Like, this seems pretty big, type of thing. And yes, Jim would have corrected me many times about his camp and stuff. As I said, we had plans for me to go up there. And it's funny, as I was getting ready for this talk, I'm like, I'm just going to start with the fact that I've never been up there, and we'll go from there. Because, you know, I'm just going to say, you know, it's so funny because he would love to go. He'd go up in the winter, and I'm not a big cold fan. So I would be like, oh yeah, have fun with that. And I'll talk to you when you get back. You know, so, you know, he would go up to his camp, and he would go, like I said, he would go spend a couple of weeks up there in January, and I'd be like, have fun. I'll talk to you when you get back. So, but yeah, but it is on my husband and I, our trip list but we will be going in the summer too. So it will be one of our road trips.
Any other questions, comments? Feel free to unmute yourself and ask whatever you would like. Oh, Taryn, I think you're muted.
There
we go.
I came in late because when I looked, there was no time on the announcement that the program was tonight. And I thought,
oh yep, I realized I forgot to put the time.
And so I ran down and got the computer and got in the middle. But I do want to thank Nicole for talking about the book. And it certainly sounds like a very interesting book. And Laura, I want to thank you for having programs that bring out these stories that just are not generally known in the community, because they are important. And there are many stories like this. There was a disaster up on Lake Suncook, and the accident that you were speaking of, did that happen on Moosehead or did it happen on Suncook?
Yeah, that was on Suncook, the one that we were talking about.
Oh, okay, then that's the same one that I'm speaking of, and that was a devastating thing. And Suncook is another very long lake, so it's a long trip from. They probably left from down around Ripagenus and headed up to the village. And that is a lake that whips up very quickly and gets to be very, very rough and difficult to manage when the wind's not right. One of those lakes that if you're canoeing, you need to understand a little bit about the weather and when to get off the lake.
Yeah. Bodies from Greenville because it was a bigger place, and that's where those people were buried, the poor immigrants. So they're in the cemetery right there in Greenville.
They what?
The people that died from that Stonehill tragedy are all buried in Greenville.
Yes, I knew that they were, and I wasn't sure from what you said because I thought which lake were they on? You said they left from Greenville to go to Suncook and died on the lake, and I thought, well, which lake are you talking about? But yes, I knew of those graves, and that is a story the old timers know, but many of the young people don't know. And I wish we could have had some video interviews with some of those old timers because they could have told you some wonderful stories. I lived up there for over 40 years. So
yeah, you're speaking. See, that's what I do for a living. Like my job as an archivist is to collect history. As the college archivist at Stonehill, I mean, we have special collections. So we have what is believed to be the world's largest shovel collection. I have 783 shovels. So if you've ever wanted to see that many shovels, you can come visit me at Stonehill. We, as I mentioned, the 500,000 photograph collection. But Stonehill started in 1948, and when our 50th reunion class, our first class, which graduated in 1952, reached their 50th reunion in 2002, we started the tradition of doing oral histories with them, and recording the stories. So, and then we share those stories with our current students. And it is amazing what our current students who have Dunkin' Donuts on campus and Au Bon Pain and some other things, and they complain about their options. And I'm like, look, and so by having those stories and telling those stories, because they're not in the official records. And so that's one of the things that we've really tried to do. And it was, that was the thing with Captain Lay. When we talked to her, Captain Lay's daughter was the only person, because he had survived, she remembered him when she was a child. But there were no other survivors who had like firsthand knowledge of the tragedy that we could find, even though it was only 1928. Yeah. So I say that Solander's grandson remembered his grandmother was a very bitter old woman. That was one of the things I don't think we put that in the book, but but those things, the Strand Theater, we actually had firsthand accounts, because that had happened in 1941 and it had been such a tragedy. The Strand Theater fire killed 13 firefighters, but dozens, survived. And the city of Brockton, and like as I said, we have an amazing fire department and fire museum in Brockton. And they have kept that story alive every year with a memorial, regardless, like through the war years, through everything that happened. And so there has been a lot. And it was when that book came out, I remember the reporter from the local paper saying to me, well, why write a book? We write about it every year in the paper. And I was like, because it's the first time you're putting it all together into one story.
Right.
But that, and that's one of the things that I try to do. As I say, history is a story. Most people will say to me when I do talks, and one of the things I try to do is I try to make history interesting. Most people think remember high school history is like this boring thing. And I'm like, no, and when I give talks and I do things, I've had people come up to me and go, oh God, I thought that was going to be so boring, but you actually made it interesting. I'm like, well, history is interesting. You just have to talk about it that way. So I'm glad, this was a story I was able to tell and, and share. In turn, you might not have heard, this was Jim Benson, that he had a camp up at the Forks. And this really was a story he wanted to tell. And I kind of was along for the ride, but kind of kept him on deadline too. That was I was the administrative person in a lot of it. He had the knowledge and I kept going, okay, we need to do this now. We had our deadline.
Organizer.
So.
Where is that memorial that you showed the picture of? Is that outside of Brockton?
It's at
Town Hall, or?
It's at the Brockton Historical Society.
Oh, okay.
Which is located at 216 North Pearl Street. It is located right off Route 24. That is where our Brockton Fire Museum and Historical Society are. So it's outside. There's a monument to that. There's also a monument to the shoe industry. As I mentioned, Brockton was pretty much a shoe town. At the turn of the 1900s, there were 90 different shoe factories and component factories. They're two of the largest male shoe factories, W.L. Douglas and Roger Keith shoe factories. They made millions of shoes, but they it's the amazement of, and that's a story I would love to tell, is the history of the Brockton shoe industry. But it is so massive, and sadly, when all the shoe factories began to close, all the records were thrown out. And so we have pieces of things, but not actual real records of the shoe companies. So that's another huge story. Today, Brockton as with most big cities, when the highway went by and it cut the city and it went by out beyond the downtown area, the city kind of died, as most of those cities do. So it has its issues, but that's where that memorial is. So if you're ever down that way, they're usually open on Sundays, but you can sometimes contact them, and if somebody's around, they might be able to give you a tour. But the memorial's outside, so you can see it.
Well, thank you. So Laura, what is the next event?
So that is still in the works. We are actually going to be having a local Maine author, Matt Cost, coming to Greenville in person, and he's going to talk about his book that is a part of the statewide summer read. So he's going to be here on July 10th. We're also doing a summer discussion program with the Maine Humanities Council, and that will probably be starting up sometime in June or possibly July. So I'll have more information forthcoming, and I'm still looking for kind of more local history, ideas. So if you have suggestions or things that you think we should, cover in kind of our local history series, let me know. So I just wanted to thank you all for attending, and thank you to Nicole for taking her, time out to talk with some of us here in Greenville and that have connections to Greenville. It's always nice to learn, having me. More about local stories and things. So, and definitely come to Greenville. And if you stop by the library, we would love to meet you here and give you some pointers on what to do in town. So.
It is on the list. It is on the list. We will, now that COVID seems to be over, we can start making our plans to
go back.
Oh yes, it's one of the most beautiful places that I've ever seen, honestly. So you should definitely, and the summer is like one of the most beautiful times to come.
Well, I would only come in the summer. I'm not a fan of the cold.
There you go.
Okay, right. Well, thank you very much. I'm going to bow out and eat some supper.
All right.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a good night.